owls, snow geese, and even white pelicans. But on this steamy Sunday morning, we are there to catch a glimpse of a rare species of Memphis jailbird leaving prison.
Nora Jackson is officially a free woman today.
A woman convicted of killing her own mother.
We're good, and off we go into the wild blue yonder.
It didn't feel real. I was just really scared that someone was going to tell me to come back in the building.
Her name is Nora Jackson, and the astonishing crime for which she served 11 years is just one aspect of her astonishing story.
So all this is new?
Yeah.
Ansley Larson, one of just a handful of friends Nora has left, drives her back into an outside world that's become oddly unfamiliar.
And then we got in the car, and the person was in the rearview mirror real fast. You are speedy.
Time now for slow, simple pleasures. Sipping a Starbucks latte.
Okay, try it now.
Exploring a smartphone for the very first time.
But where's the button?
Okay.
This is so unreal with me right now.
And baby, it's not just for today.
I know this.
Nora asks to drive past the home where she was raised, the same house where her mother died.
You want me to do anything?
I want you to keep going.
Okay.
I'm trying to think of something to say to stop the tears.
Let yourself go, baby. Stop trying to control it. It's okay.
So many memories and so much pain saturate the silence. Echoes of a horrific murder, a panicked 911 call.
Oh my God. Oh my God, please help me. Please send somebody. Okay.
And to hear Nora tell it, a miscarriage of justice.
We, the jury, find the defendant guilty of second-degree murder as included in the indictment.
Being incarcerated is tough in itself, but being incarcerated for something you didn't do is something else entirely.
Please go back to your seat.
It's very unusual to have an 18-year-old woman accused of killing her mother. 18-year-olds fighting with their mother? Very common. 18-year-old killing her mother? Almost never happens.
It wasn't supposed to turn out this way. Nora and her mother, Jennifer Jackson, lived in this neighborhood just 10 miles from the raucous barbecue and blues scene of downtown's famous Beale Street. Mom was a successful bond trader, a triathlete, regular churchgoer. She raised her only child as a single mom.
The fondest memories of your mother?
Birthdays were a really big thing in my house. It's really the little things, you know, holidays.
Nora shared these precious photos of happier times together for mother and daughter. She also recalls shopping with Jennifer at the nicer stores in Memphis and says it was Mom's favorite pastime.
I don't think there's just one I can pinpoint, but just having a mom, you know, and that's kind of rough.
As the only kid among her friends raised by a single working mom, she struggled to fit in. For her part, Jennifer Jackson was by all accounts a very permissive parent. And Nora admittedly pushed that freedom to the limit.
I had a good life, you know. I was your typical Memphis teenager, I guess.
Well, it depends on your definition of typical.
Several people have described your life as one of partying and drinking and drugs.
It didn't seem like a big deal to us at the time because that was our life. You know, we did go to parties, you know, we did smoke marijuana, we did drink. Now I look back and I can't, you know, rectify who I was as a 16, a 17, or an 18-year-old.
But at 18, Nora still hadn't graduated, bouncing between 5 different high schools and finally homeschooled.
She was a brat.
Ansley Larson, a family friend who makes her living selling handmade jewelry, saw Nora as a diamond in the rough. She knew that because Jennifer often called her for advice on raising her difficult teen.
Nora is extremely charming, even when she's a brat, and I just loved her from the minute I met her.
My mother was not just a parent, but she was a friend, so when your friend is your disciplinarian, you know, the rules are different for you, and there weren't rules for me the way there were for everybody else.
So other parents thought you were the wild child.
Yes, I was. I had earned that reputation, yes.
Yes, the shoe fit, and Nora wore it till the heel came off, which brings us to the turning point. The hotly disputed events of that steamy Saturday night in June 12 years ago. School is out and the party is on. Nora gets this nice manicure. Remember that detail. And then she says she goes out and paints the town red and doesn't stumble home till 5 a.m. the next morning.
I had no idea what was about to happen to me or, how it would shape the rest of my life. I remember coming in and seeing the broken glass in my house.
This is the glass she's talking about, part of a broken door window.
There had been times when my mother had broken the glass before, like if she was locked out. That didn't register in my mind that something terrible had happened. As I went back to my bedroom, I noticed that my mom's door was open, and I don't even think that I could even describe what I saw, let alone what I felt. But I found my mom.
At the foot of the bed?
Yeah. Can I have just 1 second?
It's still hard for her to talk about, and here's why. Jennifer Jackson is covered in blood, sprawled naked on the floor, stabbed 50 times. Nancy Grace has studied the case.
The mom was so brutalized, just soaked in blood. She had stab wounds to every part of her body.
She wasn't moving. I remember shaking her, and then I remember being scared. I remember running across the street to get help.
Nora rouses a neighbor, and they run back to the house together. She says panic has set in by the time she calls 911.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God. Please help me. Please send somebody.
Okay, listen to me, ma'am. I need you to calm down, okay, so we can help your mother. Okay?
An ugly crime, a pretty victim, and a mushrooming whodunit.
The 39-year-old Jackson was killed over the weekend.
But what makes this case truly remarkable is that this isn't the first time.
Nora Jackson's been through this before. Her father was killed 1.5 years ago.
That's right. This is actually the second time one of Nora Jackson's parents has turned up dead. As the yellow tape goes up on Jennifer Jackson's front lawn, theories of her murder start blooming like Tennessee passion flowers.
Police calling Jackson's murder a home invasion, robbery, homicide.
Maybe it's a robbery gone wrong. The house appears to be ransacked, a mess of boxes and packages all over. Yet police soon realize that's because Jennifer Jackson's shopping habit was really more of a compulsion.
Nothing was stolen from the home. Nothing was even ransacked or pillaged.
But now another disturbing theory emerges, linked to a prior tragedy in Nora's life.
Jennifer was divorced from Nora's father, Nazmi Hazania, and coincidentally, Nazmi was murdered as well.
Nora Jackson's been through this before. Her father was killed 1.5 years ago.
We haven't said much about Nora's father because in truth he wasn't around much. This we do know. Nazmi Hassani, born in Lebanon, owned a local limousine company and a gas station convenience store. He named it Nora's Quick Stop after the daughter he rarely saw.
He led an alternative lifestyle, to say the very least.
On this fateful night in January 2004, the Quick Stop security cameras are rolling when a killer comes to call. Nazmi meets with him off camera and is immediately shot in the head.
So it was more or less walk through the front door, walk to the back, fire the shot.
A police investigator tells a local station that this doesn't look like a routine robbery. Watch as the killer stashes the security camera tape in his coat, not knowing there's a backup.
He goes through the drawers in the office as if he's looking for something, and it's sort of a last-minute thing in which he takes the cash from the cash register.
An afterthought.
He was really assassinated.
Bill Shelton was friends with Nazmi. He feels the killer may have been searching for an incriminating videotape. But why?
There's been speculation that it may have been a video of someone in a sexual encounter.
A clue. Nora's Quick Stop was between a police precinct and a strip club. Not prime real estate, but perhaps a good place for another kind of quick stop.
Nazmi told me once that a policeman had used his back office to have sex with one of the dancers.
But wait, there's more. Shelton suspects his friend had quite a dark side. Was Nazmi running a blackmail operation?
I've heard other speculation that he had cameras in his limousines and often was filming people having sex with prostitutes.
Secret sex tapes? Did someone want them badly enough to kill?
That man was looking for something, and then Jennifer later on, 16 months later, was murdered, probably by the same person who killed Nazmi.
That is a myth. Things like that only happen in the movies, and this is not a movie. This is real.
The murder of Nora's father was never solved, and now her mother has been killed too. The wild child is now an orphan.
18-year-old Nora Jackson returns home to collect a few things just one day after she found her mother's body.
Your parents are like the people that bring you into this world, and they're the people that you know, no matter what, have your back.
Unconditional love.
Unconditional love, yeah.
Nora's problems are just beginning because police are suddenly gravitating to a new suspect, her.
Fire department, what's the address of the emergency?
Their suspicion starts with that 911 call.
Someone look in my house. My mom is bleeding. Someone help me right now.
Listen as the operator asks if her mother has been shot.
Ma'am, was anyone shot?
No.
So when did Nora Jackson get her medical degree? That night? How did she know from a distance her mother had not been shot?
Then, those 50 stab wounds.
When someone has been stabbed this many times, the authorities will immediately be thinking, this isn't a stranger. This is someone who was angry and enraged.
I know that everybody says that means it was personal. I think it means that whoever did it was scared and adrenaline took over and started stabbing just out of their minds.
But now, take a look back at the broken window Nora noticed when she came home.
The scene is totally staged. There's no intruder because look at the glass that was broken. Only someone familiar with that home would know that there was a lock, a second lock, up beside the broken glass, but it was only visible from inside the house.
Did you break that glass?
No, I did not.
But there's a much bigger question that trips Nora up. Jennifer Jackson was killed sometime between her last phone call with Nora at 12:20 a.m. and that 911 call at 5. So where exactly was Nora during that time?
You were not in that house?
No, I was not in that house.
Before 5 o'clock?
Before 5 o'clock, no.
That's what she says. Nora's story to the cops? Her evening kicks off at a local Italian festival. Then she hits 2 house parties. After a phone call with her mom, Nora buys cigarettes at 12:46. Then at 4:20, she buys gas before heading home. But what about this? Between 1 and 3 a.m., Nora's cell phone goes oddly quiet. And then there's this, something she failed to mention to the cops. A 4 a.m. stop here at this Walgreens to buy first aid supplies for a cut on her hand.
I could watch that Walgreens security footage all day long. She couldn't stop the blood on her hand. In fact, she takes the paper towel, and it's all on video, away from the cashier and starts trying to staunch the flow of blood on her hand.
The most damning evidence, though, Nora, is that videotape of you at Walgreens buying emergency or first aid supplies, the peroxide, the bandages.
Right, which is why I probably neglected to tell the police that. I was put in a locked room. They started making a very big deal about the cut on my hand, I just got that feeling that something wasn't right. So no, I was not forthcoming with information, but not because I had anything to hide, but because I felt like I was being looked at.
Yes, she was. And 3 months later, the party is officially over for Nora Jackson. She's arrested for her own mother's murder. And even if matricide is a rarity, the good people of Memphis seem to think Nora had it in her.
She must have just gone berserk. I don't know. I hate to throw that in, but that's the way we all feel.
Everybody knew it. Everybody.
Did you have anything to do with the killing of your mother?
No.
Could it have been that you were high? You said you were smoking weed, you did drugs. Maybe you were in a drug haze and did this.
No, I won't deny that. I smoked marijuana that night. We had been drinking, amongst other things, but no, I didn't kill my mother.
But now the die is cast, and Nora's hard-partying reputation and that controversial cut are about to cause trouble for her in court.
The biggest problem for her in this case, what she was doing that night and how she cut her hand.
But could that fresh manicure be Nora's best defense? The County Justice Center in downtown Memphis is about to become a coliseum for two legal gladiators. In Nora Jackson's corner, a pit bull of a defense attorney named Valerie Corder, who loves a legal dogfight almost as much as she loves her dog, Beasley.
Why would you take this case on pro bono?
I have a soft spot for people who are being bullied or treated unjustly or unfairly.
Across the aisle, prosecutor Amy Wyrick, an ambitious, no-holds-barred assistant DA.
Amy's a real no-nonsense type, very intense.
As the trial starts, Wyrick comes out swinging for the electrified fences. She wants a life sentence.
That defendant killed her mother with premeditation.
Wyrick calls many of the kids in Nora's circle to the stand. A phalanx of her now former friends lines up to portray her as a girl gone wild.
On the stand today, we heard from more of Nora Jackson's friends.
She liked to use Xanax bars, pharmaceutical drugs, cocaine, mushrooms on occasion.
How much did that hurt her case?
Significantly.
Nora's friends admitted to doing much of the same alongside her.
Most of the stuff they said was true. I mean, she was doing that. But so were they. If the behavior that she exhibited was grounds for mother murder, then why aren't all those other children's mothers dead? They were right along with her.
Aside from soiling Nora's reputation, the prosecution raises questions about her behavior on the night of the crime. This is the neighbor Nora ran to for help after finding her mother's body. He grabbed his gun and ran back with Nora.
And I got to that front door first, and I took a deep breath. I do remember that she went in the door before me, and I thought, there's somebody in that house.
If you thought somebody was in the house and you thought your mother was injured, why would you have run back in before the guy with the gun?
A lot was made of my actions, you know, of what I did or didn't do, or, you know, but I don't think they write a handbook on stuff like that.
If my mother had been murdered, I'd be running all over the place without realizing what I was doing.
And anyway, why would Nora murder her own mother? To answer that, the prosecution paints a picture of a relationship in crisis. Jennifer Jackson, they claim, was finally trying to rein in her untamed daughter.
She was just out of control.
Judge Chris Kraft presided over the case.
She was shutting down her lifestyle and was going to send her somewhere where she wouldn't be able to have sex and drugs. And that was the motive for the killing.
There was a portrayal of her as not only friction in their relationship, but much more than that, much more violent, much more antagonistic.
That is the theme of this damning testimony from one-time friend Kirby McDonald.
Nora said, my mom's a she needs to go to hell.
You know what? My mother was a bitch sometimes too, and sometimes I wanted her to go to hell. I don't know if Nora said that or didn't say that, but so what if she did? They're teenage girls, for heaven's sake.
Nora says it never happened.
Did you argue about partying and curfews?
I didn't have a curfew. We had things that we didn't agree on, but there was a respect there. I didn't have things for my mom.
Another suggested motive? Money. Prosecutors claim Nora's deceased father left behind a sizable estate. The defense denies that, but neighbor Sheila Koch says Nora was salivating for cash.
I was out on the street walking my dog, and they were coming in. And I heard Nora say, just give me the effing money. Just give me the effing money.
And it's not just friends and neighbors pointing the finger. Now, remarkably, Nora's own family has come to court. Not to praise her, but to bury her. Here's Nora's uncle, Eric Sherwood.
I asked Nora if she had any idea about my sister's death, anything, to help out with the detectives. and she just basically just put her head down, wouldn't say anything. That was it.
He also tells the court that he had heard Nora pressing Jennifer about her assets and life insurance just days before she was murdered.
Your own uncle testified that you killed your mother because you wanted the money.
That's the one that hurt me. That's the one that pierced my heart.
Nora's aunts also pile on, hoping to send their own niece to prison.
They wouldn't talk to each other, and just, it was very cold.
What shocked me was what they didn't say. You know, they didn't say that, you know, they never really cared for me. They didn't say that they never liked my father.
It's never helpful when your family isn't on your side in a case where someone is accused of killing a family member.
Nora's aunts say the real reason they turned on her is because she could never explain where she was at the time of the crime.
I would have given her any lawyers or anything she needed if she had an alibi and could prove to me where she was or who she was with when my sister was murdered. And she said, I don't know.
And now the prosecution's key witness, her quiet, reserved friend, Andrew Hammock, who they hope will blow Nora's alibi out of the water.
Andrew Hammock describes his and Nora Jackson's relationship at the time as, quote, friends with benefits.
He tells the jury he exchanged calls and texts with Nora around the time of the murder. He says she told him she was at the house and asked him to meet her there. She also left a string of messages.
It was throughout the night, and the last thing I do remember when I woke up the morning of June 5th is I had a text message or a voicemail that said answer. Need to talk to you or something.
And what about that suspicious cut?
The biggest problem for her in this case are her own words, her own differing accounts of how she cut her hand.
Let's count.
She claimed that she cut it at a tying festival.
She told me that she was in her house chasing her kitten through the kitchen and cut it on some glass.
She said that she cut it on barbed wire.
She cut it trying to get the cat out of the garage. I burned it cooking macaroni and cheese.
I've cooked a lot of Kraft mac and cheese, and I never gashed my hand open and raced to Walgreens for Band-Aids.
All these people testified that there were different stories you gave about how you got that cut in your hand.
I mean, I gave my statement to the police, and I will allow that to speak for itself.
That statement matches the first version, that she cut it at that Italian festival. But then why, prosecutors ask, was there a cover-up, literally, despite the steamy 90-degree heat?
For days afterward, wearing nothing but long sleeves that she held in her wrists like this to try to cover up that cut. I mean, what more do I have to tell you?
Yes, I wore long sleeves. I was known for that. I mean, my father's Lebanese. I have very, very hairy arms. I used to shave them when I was younger.
The battery of witnesses, the wafer-thin alibi, the questionable cut. None of it looks good for Nora. But wait, will DNA found at the scene get her off the hook?
Not only was Nora's DNA not found in the room, but someone else's was.
To day 6 of the Nora Jackson murder trial.
The news is bad for Nora Jackson. With this much circumstantial evidence, it seems unlikely she'll be walking in Memphis.
That defendant killed her mother.
But Nora does not despair, because there's a gap in the state's case as wide as the Mississippi. There's no forensic evidence connecting her to the crime.
You would think if you have a bloody fight with a knife that her DNA will be somewhere. There was no bloody clothes found, and there was no bloody knife found.
These knives are at the scene, but cops cannot identify the murder weapon.
And they tested a lot of evidence. And it's quite significant that most of that evidence had absolutely nothing to do with Nora Jackson. Nora's blood was not at the crime scene, and Jennifer's blood was not on Nora.
I think that it does seem a little strange that there wouldn't be any of hers there, given the violence of this whole episode.
But now it gets more complicated. because investigators did find the DNA of 2 other females still unidentified. Were they the real killers?
Not only was Nora's DNA not found in the room, but someone else's was. The defense's position is, well, find those people.
Investigators couldn't find a match, but they also had no way of knowing if that DNA predated the night of the murder. And there's more evidence that could point to another unknown suspect and away from Nora. This envelope contains small clumps of hair gripped in Jennifer's dead hand. They're blonde. Nora's hair is brown. So whose were they? We don't know, because forensic experts never tested them.
The clump of hair.
I find that really hard to believe that, you will parade 40 witnesses to say that I partook in drugs, that I drank, that I did all that, but you didn't test a clump of hair found in a murdered woman's hand.
Newsflash, check your law books. The defense can test evidence too. But Nora Jackson's team wouldn't touch that hair with a 10-foot pole. Why? Because that way they could complain about it throughout the entire trial, suggesting that the state had failed.
But Nora's lawyer says a test would have been worthless.
The hair that was later found had not been maintained in a chain of custody that would have made it worthwhile to test it, because we would not have been able to prove it hadn't been tampered with.
The prosecution has now rested its case. The jurors are looking
The prosecution rests, and there's a big surprise. You don't call a single witness. Was that a reckless decision?
No, it wasn't a reckless decision. It's very unusual for a defendant to testify unless it's a self-defense case.
She wasn't going to testify, but other people could have testified in her defense.
So why not put some witnesses on the stand who were friends of her, who would have spoken positively of Nora?
Well, in retrospect, that does seem to be an issue.
She needed to have a defense. I don't know what they could have done, but they could have done something.
If Nora had testified, she might have sounded something like this.
You wouldn't kill your mother because you were in a rage.
No.
You wouldn't kill her for the money.
No. There was no rage. There was no money. There was no motive. But so one was created.
Ladies and gentlemen, this case is about Jennifer Jackson.
In closing, prosecutor Stephen Jones returns to Nora's motivation for matricide.
Her mother was the only thing between the defendant's lifestyle of freedom. She was the only thing between the defendant's father's money and the defendant. She took those knives with premeditation, thinking of one thing. She wasn't going to cut bologna with those knives. She was going to cut the thing that was standing in the way of her lifestyle of freedom.
Then prosecutor Amy Wyrick turns to Nora and adds a dramatic flourish that later will have a far-reaching impact.
Just tell us where you were. That's all we're asking, Nora.
And then there was that manicure. In the defense closing, Valerie Corder argues the condition of Nora's hands is actually proof of her innocence, despite that cut.
Her nails that had been manicured the day before were pristine. There was not a chip, a flake, a crack. No blood, no hair, no nothing. Those were not the hands of a child who killed her mother.
It just seems logical that you've got all this motion, you've got all this force, you've got blood going wherever. It seems like there would be more of that type of injury than just one cut.
Then Corder plays her strongest card, the lack of other physical evidence. But is it an ace?
None of Nora Jackson's blood. Pillow, none of Nora Jackson's blood.
This doesn't prove it, this doesn't prove it, this doesn't prove it.
Comforters, dust ruffles, other items from the bedroom, none of Nora Jackson's blood.
And she ended up with this pile of evidence over here.
The only place they found Nora Jackson's DNA was in the sample she had volunteered to them. It wasn't on any of the evidence.
I remember that being fairly effective.
She a diabolical, premeditated killer who's brilliant and leaves absolutely no blood at the scene? Or is she some drug-addled, foolish teenager? Can't possibly be both.
Your best hope if you're the defense isn't that the jurors say, there's no way she did it. Instead, you're hoping they say, yeah, I think she might have done it. But that's not proof beyond a reasonable doubt.
After 12 days and 40 witnesses, the jury has heard enough.
All right, verdict reads as follows. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty of second-degree murder as included. Circumstantial evidence just drew a tight noose around her, and there was no way she could get out of that.
Nora bows her head while her dead mother's sisters and friends exchange hugs.
I just couldn't believe it. They didn't prove anything. How do you convict this child?
I really was of the belief that, you know, I will go to trial and I will prove that I'm innocent and then I will get to go home. And I think I was in shock.
We're disappointed in the verdict, of course.
Years later, Nora is still haunted by her decision not to testify.
Are you sorry you didn't?
Oh, I'm beyond sorry that I didn't. But I don't like to live in a world of regret. You know, there's nothing I can do about that.
It's true that there was virtually no forensic evidence against Nora, and yet the jury convicted her. Were you overconfident, too cocky?
Oh, I don't think I could be described as that. It was very difficult to sit through 2 weeks of family members, friends, neighbors, and other people focusing on behavior that did not prove she had killed her mother.
During the following years in prison, only Ansley and a handful of other friends visit Nora.
Does it toughen you? Made you a tough person?
Yes, it's definitely survival of the fittest.
Valerie Corder never stops fighting for Nora. Over the next 11 years, while her client is doing her orange is the new black thing, Corder appeals the case all the way up to the Tennessee Supreme Court with newsworthy results.
Here's more information on Nora Jackson's case.
Remember prosecutor Amy Wyrick's big law and order moment?
Just tell us where you were. That's all we're asking, Nora.
Those words, according to Corder, violated Nora's constitutional right not to testify.
It was a rhetorical question, but the Supreme Court, in their wisdom, decided that that was a comment on Nora's choice to remain silent.
And remember that key witness, Andrew Hammock, the only one who put Nora at the crime scene? Well, it turns out the prosecution never disclosed this contradictory statement.
He had written a handwritten note saying, oh yeah, I was totally drugged out and high as a kite at the time, so I don't remember it that well.
He was rolling on ecstasy, he wrote.
We now know that his altered memory and misstatement of the evidence is rather clear.
The Tennessee State Supreme Court ruled last night for Nora Jackson to get a new trial.
Oh my God, I was ecstatic. I didn't even believe it. I was watching television in my cell, and I saw my name, and it said Nora Jackson to receive new trial. And I mean, I can't even begin to express the emotions that I had.
Recent news that she's getting a new trial has Nora's supporters saying it's about time.
So in your opinion, this entire trial was...
It was a joke. But it wasn't a joke because the punchline is Nora Jackson spends 11 and a half years in the friggin' pen.
For something...
She did not do it.
Now a retrial looms, but it doesn't look like that throng of prosecution witnesses is too eager for a repeat performance.
Other witnesses have indicated to us that they were not cooperative and not willing to come forward.
So both sides compromised.
Jackson and her attorneys accepted a plea deal from prosecutors of voluntary manslaughter, avoiding a potentially lengthy new trial.
Nora signs what's called an Alford plea.
An Alford plea is a sort of bizarre legal option. She basically said, I will accept responsibility for this, I will take the punishment for this, but I have to be able to say that I didn't do it. I'm not going to admit guilt.
It counts as a guilty plea and it counts as a conviction, so that under the law you're guilty.
It's very likely that it would have taken another year, if not 2 years, to have gotten her case to trial. It is a way to end this decade-long drama and trauma to be able to leave prison and begin your life.
I felt pressured and I wanted my life back.
Still, it takes another 15 months until Nora is finally sprung from the big house.
She was greeted by her friend with a long, emotional embrace after more than a decade behind bars.
As for Amy Wyrick, she's now the county district attorney, but found herself facing ethics charges from the state. Prosecutor Amy Wyrick is up on charges of professional misconduct.
She's refused to give us an interview, so we're waiting here to demand answers.
All right, let's go.
Ms. Wyrick, I'm John Quinones with 2020. We'd like to talk to you about the Nora Jackson case.
Not right now.
We've been trying to get in touch with you. The state has called for your public censure for botching that murder case.
It's not a fair assessment at all, and it will play itself out in the appropriate forums.
Your trial errors either sent an innocent girl to prison or they let a killer go free. Which is worse?
She killed her mother, and she did her time for it.
We'd really like to talk to you about this. Why can't we sit down and talk to you?
You can make an appointment like everybody else.
We tried.
Judge Kraft, on the other hand, is happy to discuss the case.
I thought Nora Jackson had a very fair trial. And she was obviously guilty, and I ruled she was obviously guilty.
The morning of her release from prison, Nora walks into Ansley's house, her new home, one of the few places in Memphis where she's still welcome.
I want to go outside, can I?
Yeah.
They've always had a great backyard. It's just so nice to be able to go outside if I want to go outside and to not, have to get someone's permission.
Then they visit Target to shop for some new clothes.
I like the shirt.
Yeah, that looks good.
I love this shirt.
Nora didn't have a mother anymore, and her family
turned on her.
Shame on them. I'm sorry.
Trying to restart her life, Nora begins a job in the kitchen of a nearby bar and grill. Having earned her GED in jail, she's applying to colleges now.
Your mother left an estate that's worth about $1.5 million.
Yes.
Are you going to fight your family for a piece of that?
Yes.
Since we spoke to Nora, she's settled with her mother's sisters for a portion of that estate, though the amount is confidential. She may have some of the money, but she hasn't won over many of her critics.
Yeah, she did a few years behind bars, but she basically won the lottery on this one. She walked free on her mother's murder.
How often do you think about your mother?
Every day. Every day. But more than anything, I wish I could talk to her. I think she'd be proud of who I am. My home was my mom. It wasn't a house. It wasn't clothes or a car. It was